It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang just as I was settling down with a cup of chamomile tea. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment before walking to the door. There he was, the delivery guy, a young man with a polite smile, carrying a medium-sized package. "Oh, hi," I said, taking the package from him. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting it today." He smiled, brushing a lock of hair back from his forehead. "Delivery schedule can be unpredictable. I'm just glad I caught you at home." I nodded, feeling a flicker of warmth at the simple friendliness in his tone. There was something calm and reassuring in the way he spoke, a presence that made the ordinary task of handing over a package feel different. "Would you like me to set it down for you?" he asked, glancing toward the living room. "That would be wonderful, thank you," I replied. As he stepped inside briefly, I noticed the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the crisp aroma of the late afternoon air. It was subtle, but it drew my attention more than it should have. As he placed the package carefully on the coffee table, we made small talk, the weather, local traffic, and the usual pleasantries. But there was an undercurrent of something unusual in his presence, a quiet attentiveness that made me aware of every detail. The way his eyes observed the room without rushing, the careful placement of the package, the easy yet respectful posture he maintained. "Everything okay with the delivery?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while my curiosity grew. "Yes, ma'am," he replied softly. "Just wanted to make sure it arrived safely. Sometimes the contents are delicate." I nodded, appreciating the consideration in his tone. It wasn't just about delivering a package, it was about awareness, attention, and thoughtfulness. Somehow, that awareness made the space between us feel charged with quiet energy, a subtle intimacy born of presence rather than words. I offered him a seat briefly, and to my surprise, he accepted. "Just for a moment, if you don't mind," he said politely, settling into the chair across from me. I poured a small cup of tea for him, careful not to overstep, feeling strangely aware of how ordinary gestures had begun to carry meaning. As he sipped the tea, we continued talking about everyday things, but the conversation soon deepened in a way I hadn't anticipated. He shared small details about his life, the challenges of balancing work and school, the responsibility of helping his family, the little victories and disappointments that shaped his days. I found myself listening more than speaking, drawn into the quiet sincerity of his words. There was a moment when he laughed softly at something I said, and I felt a warmth spread through me, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't romantic in the conventional sense. It was connection, human and unpretentious, but it lingered, embedding itself quietly in my awareness. Time seemed to stretch unusually. What had started as a brief delivery had transformed into an unexpected encounter, full of shared understanding and attentive presence. I realized that the ordinary act of receiving a package had opened a door to something rare: genuine conversation, mutual respect, and a subtle recognition of shared humanity. Eventually, he glanced at the clock and rose, offering a polite smile. "I should probably get going," he said softly. "It was nice talking with you." I smiled back, a little reluctantly. Yes, it really was. "Thank you for staying and making sure everything was all right." As he stepped toward the door, I felt a gentle awareness linger in the room, the kind that comes from a rare, unplanned connection. I watched him leave, the package still on the table, and I realized that the ordinary could become extraordinary when someone brought attention, presence, and care into it. Sitting back down, I sipped the last of my tea and let the quiet settle around me, feeling that the evening had already left a mark, a memory of human connection that would linger long after the delivery had ended. After the delivery guy left, I thought I would finally have a quiet evening. I set the package aside and tried to return to my tea, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him. There was something unusual about the way he had carried himself, polite, attentive, yet with a calm strength that made me feel unexpectedly comfortable in his presence. It wasn't just the conversation, it was the way he noticed details, the careful way he moved, the quiet assurance in his tone. A few minutes later, there was another knock at the door. My heart jumped slightly. Could he have forgotten something? I opened the door, and to my surprise, it was him again. "I realized I left my pen in the van," he said with a sheepish grin. "Mind if I come in for a moment to grab it?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. As he entered, the familiar calm of his presence filled the room again. This time, the package on the table seemed almost like a bridge between us, the silent reminder of our earlier interaction. I offered him a chair, and he sat, this time more relaxed, as if the second visit gave him a little freedom to linger. We didn't speak immediately. There was a quietness between us, comfortable yet charged with subtle awareness. I noticed how the fading afternoon light played across his features, the careful way he shifted in his chair, the faint smell of his cologne mixing with the warmth of my living room. Small details that would have gone unnoticed with anyone else felt magnified, imbued with meaning I couldn't entirely explain. "You know," he said after a moment, "it's not often I get to take the time to just be present with someone when I deliver a package." His voice was soft but sincere, carrying a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. "It's rare for anyone to truly notice the little things, isn't it?" I replied. "I think moments like these are special in their own quiet way." We talked again, but this time the conversation felt deeper, more reflective. He shared stories about his life, the small struggles and triumphs of his daily routine, and I found myself opening up more than I anticipated, reflecting on my own experiences, my own quiet observations about life, connection, and the fleeting moments that leave a lasting impression. At one point, he glanced at the package and then back at me, a subtle question in his eyes. I understood instantly. He wanted to know if I felt comfortable with his lingering presence. The gesture wasn't overt, but the unspoken consideration made my heart beat a little faster. There was respect there, mutual awareness, and a sense of unhurried attention that made me feel unusually seen. The minutes stretched into nearly an hour, and I realized I wasn't just enjoying conversation. I was noticing the way our presence influenced each other, the subtle energy and shared attention, the way quiet intimacy can form without drama or expectation. It was gentle, sincere, and profoundly moving. Eventually he stood, giving a polite, appreciative nod. "I should really head out this time. I promise I won't be back until the next scheduled delivery," he said, a playful hint in his tone. I smiled back, almost reluctantly. "I'll hold you to that," I said softly, though a part of me wanted the evening to continue indefinitely. As he stepped outside and closed the door behind him, I felt a quiet lingering in the room, a warmth that wasn't just physical but emotional, a testament to the unusual depth of connection that could arise from a simple, unexpected encounter. The package sat silently on the table, but the memory of his presence, his attentiveness, and the shared moments of reflection would stay with me long after he left. I poured another cup of tea, this time letting it cool slowly in my hands, and sat in silence, savoring the subtle, unexpected joy of the evening. I realized that ordinary moments could become extraordinary when someone brought awareness, care, and presence into them, and that sometimes even a brief encounter could leave a lasting impression on the heart. The next morning I found myself thinking about him again, though I tried not to. It was strange how a simple encounter could linger in your mind, like a song you hadn't realized you remembered. The package still sat on my coffee table, unopened, a quiet reminder of yesterday's unexpected intimacy. I had planned to spend the morning tidying up, but instead I kept glancing toward the door, half expecting him to return. And then, as if my thoughts had summoned him, there was another knock. My heart skipped a beat. When I opened the door, it wasn't exactly him, At least, not as I expected. He stood there holding a clipboard, looking slightly more serious than before, but with that same quiet calm that had drawn me in yesterday. "I know this might seem unusual," he began, glancing at the package behind me, but I noticed a small issue with the labeling. I thought it would be best to come by and ensure everything is correct before the delivery continues. I blinked, a little taken aback, and then stepped aside to let him in. "Of course, I appreciate the attention to detail," I said. As he moved closer to inspect the package, I felt a surprising flutter of anticipation, not inappropriate, just a keen awareness of his presence. There was something about the way he carried himself, attentive, respectful, and quietly confident. Even the simple act of bending over to check the label seemed deliberate, thoughtful, and subtly engaging. We spoke softly as he worked, discussing the contents of the package, minor delivery logistics, and the little nuances that come with managing careful shipments. But beneath the surface, there was a palpable connection. Every glance, every gesture seemed to carry weight, though unspoken. I felt a heightened awareness of him, and I could sense that he noticed me in return, the way I moved around the room, the expressions on my face, the subtle ways I interacted with the package. At one point, I offered to help him adjust something, and our hands touched briefly. The contact was fleeting, but enough to make my heart skip. He smiled softly, acknowledging the moment with a quiet warmth, and we both stepped back, but the tension lingered in the air, gentle, respectful, and deeply human. We talked more, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected. I shared memories, little reflections about my life, and moments that had shaped me. He listened, genuinely attentive, asking thoughtful questions, and offering insights without ever imposing. It was rare, this kind of presence, this kind of listening, and I realized I hadn't felt it in years. As he finished inspecting the package, he stood and took a moment to glance around the room. "You've made this space very welcoming," he said quietly, and I realized that his words weren't just about the physical room. They reflected an awareness of the care I put into creating a comfortable, lived-in home. For a moment, we simply stood there, the quiet stretching between us, charged with subtle energy. It was a moment of mutual recognition, a shared acknowledgement of the small, meaningful ways people connect, of trust built in silence, and the understated intimacy of being truly seen. Eventually, he straightened and said softly, "I should go. The delivery route won't wait, and I don't want to keep anyone else waiting." I nodded, though part of me wished he could linger just a little longer. "Thank you for taking the time, for everything." He smiled, that same gentle warmth in his eyes. "It's been my pleasure," he said. Sometimes these brief visits turn out to be the most memorable. When he finally stepped outside, closing the door behind him, I lingered near the window, watching him walk to his van. The quiet hum of the morning seemed different now, imbued with a new awareness, the realization that even ordinary tasks, ordinary people, could leave extraordinary impressions if you noticed the subtleties of presence, attentiveness, and care. I walked back to the living room, my fingers brushing the package, feeling the strange thrill of anticipation and reflection all at once. Something about these encounters had awakened a new awareness in me, a recognition that connection could appear in the simplest forms, and that human presence, even fleeting and unexpected, could leave a lasting mark on your heart. The house felt quiet, almost serene, but I couldn't shake the lingering presence of the morning's visit. The ordinary stillness of my living room was now infused with the memory of his attentive, calm presence. Even the sunlight streaming through the window seemed warmer, richer, more alive. I realized that the simple act of opening the door to a delivery had transformed into something far more meaningful. I sat on the sofa, my fingers brushing over the package that had started it all. Somehow it no longer felt like just a delivery. It was a reminder of connection, of small gestures that carry weight, and of the rare, unexpected moments that leave an imprint on your heart. I thought about his quiet attentiveness, the care in every word, every glance, and the way our shared presence had unfolded naturally, without rush or expectation. As I sipped my tea, I reflected on the subtle intimacy of those interactions. There had been no drama, no overblown declarations, just human attention, respect, and understanding. And yet, the impact was undeniable. I realized that life's richest moments often arrive quietly, wrapped in ordinary acts that become extraordinary only when someone chooses to be fully present. I walked slowly through the living room, noticing the details I had ignored before, the faint scent of chamomile lingering in the air, the soft light illuminating the edges of the furniture, the way the curtains moved gently with the breeze. Every subtle detail felt more vivid now, more alive, as if the memory of his presence had heightened my perception. I thought about how rare such encounters were, how often we rush past people without noticing the depth of their humanity. But in that brief, unexpected time, we had shared something real, mutual respect, emotional awareness, and a quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence. It was a reminder that intimacy doesn't always need to be loud or overt. It can exist in attentiveness, in shared silences, in the genuine care for another's comfort and feelings. Eventually, I set the package aside and allowed myself to sink fully into the sofa, letting the quiet envelop me. There was a gentle satisfaction in knowing that even fleeting moments could hold profound meaning, that even brief encounters could leave lasting impressions. I realized that what mattered wasn't the length of the visit or the size of the gesture, but the sincerity, attention, and presence that had accompanied it. As the evening approached and the light softened, I felt a renewed sense of gratitude, not just for the visit itself, but for the reminder that life could surprise you in small, meaningful ways. The delivery guy had stayed longer than expected. Yes, but more importantly, he had created a space where connection, reflection, and human awareness could flourish quietly, leaving a subtle but enduring mark on my heart. I smiled softly to myself, feeling a warmth that lingered long after the door had closed. Life, I realized, had a way of gifting moments like this when you least expect them. Moments of attention, understanding, and genuine presence that remind you of the beauty in simple human connection. And as the evening deepened into night, I felt at peace, carrying with me the quiet joy and reflection of an ordinary day transformed into something extraordinary.